This is every single feature coming in 7 Days to Die Alpha 21 that we know of. And I probably missed something to be honest, but let's just get into it. First up, learn by reading. Crafting quality will no longer be governed by perks like Pummel Pete or Miner 69er, and perks and recipes are no longer necessary to learn how to craft items. Now there will be 23 crafting skills as seen on screen, all governed by a specific crafting magazine that you can find out in the world. If you want to craft everything at every level, you would have to find thousands of these skill books. One exception to this rule, however, is modifications for weapons, tools, vehicles and armor. Mods will still have schematics you can find throughout the world. As you can probably tell, reading a crafting book will raise your skill with that crafting skill by 1. Each tech level having a separate range in the skill spectrum, which means that you'll be able to craft earlier gear at higher qualities. Perks will not be completely irrelevant for crafting though, as they do govern your probability of finding the corresponding crafting parts and magazines in loot. Then, when you max out the crafting skill, it'll reduce the chance of finding that particular magazine, allowing you to collect the others more easily. Oh, and you'll now be able to choose to craft lower level gear for less resources, so no being stuck without a pickaxe because you're too good at making pickaxes and can't find the one last piece of duct tape you need. The next change we should cover is the drinking water rebalance. Empty jars are gone. Instead, when you drink a water item, the jar will simply disappear, presumably being eaten by the player. On top of this, murky water will now be the only water item found in loot and water sources. Players can drink murky water directly from water sources now with an empty hand by pressing E. To make matters worse, murky water will now cause 5 damage to the player, on top of it already having a chance to give you dysentery. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, you can now not purify water without a cooking pot. Previously, you could boil water without a cooking pot, it just took much longer. To counteract this brutal spike in annoying difficulty, they are adding in the Dew Collector workstation, which will passively generate 3 water per day, and this requires a non-craftable part to make, which you can find in loot and at the traders. Onto some vehicle changes next. Vehicles are going to be taking a lot more damage from crashes than they used to. As a trade-off, they're going to be much more effective at killing zombies when you drive into them. Vehicles will now also show their damage states when taking amounts of damage. Most vehicles will smoke at 25% health and will burst into flames at 0% health, and below 0% health you have a chance for the vehicle to explode. On top of this, the effectiveness of repair kits has been decreased, no longer restoring all of a vehicle's health. Now they will restore a fixed amount, and Grease Monkey, the perk in the intellect tree, will give you 10% more health restoration with each rank. Oh, and bicycles will smoke when they break for some reason. I'm not sure how that works, there really shouldn't be much combustion going on there, it's pedals. Water simulation is up next. Water will now flow slightly better than it used to, and swimming will be a little bit more enjoyable at the cost of swimming now always costing stamina. Player HUD changes. You'll now see this danger marker to show the danger level of biomes and POIs, with the red skulls indicating the tier of the POI, and the orange skulls indicating the danger level of the biome. You'll also see the name of the POI you're in, and it's currently unknown if you can toggle these. I personally would really hope so, they're quite intrusive on the screen. We're also getting a crafting recipe tracker like the one seen in many popular mods, such as Undead Legacy, which allows the player to pin a crafting recipe to their HUD and shows you what you need to collect and updates as you gather components, to save you opening and closing and finding the recipe over and over again. However, you can only pin one recipe at a time, which is slightly disappointing. Staying in the vein of HUD changes, we're also seeing a change to item feedback. When you collect something now, you'll see how much of the item you just picked up, alongside how much of an item you already have in your inventory. Again, presumably this is there to try and prevent you from having to constantly spam open your inventory. And you'll now also get a warning if your armor durability is low, and it will appear above your health. This is pretty useful because most of the time you find out your armor is broken by getting punched in the mouth and it hurting a lot more than you expected. And this last one is probably going to mostly benefit content creators, but using the F7 key to hide your HUD will now still allow you to interact with the world. For example, right now, if you hide the HUD, you won't actually be able to open doors. This should now be fixed. Next up, POIs. New points of interest are coming with 100 new locations, including I think 5 tier 5 POIs, 2 of which are prisons, and one of which is definitely the jewel of Alpha 21, the Vanity Tower. Fantastic looking modern apartment building, and we even see some interesting lights going on at the top there. We're also seeing hundreds of old POIs being updated to current standards, and the traders will have updated compounds, complete with suspicious helipads that definitely don't have a purpose for later in development and definitely aren't going to be a form of fast travel. And the traders will now have doors on every side to make it slightly more convenient. Speaking of those traders, we're also getting trader changes, including a new trader stage system, which will be very similar to the loot stage and game stage systems. Trader stage will be governed by your normal progression and will control what items you find in the trader, so you shouldn't be finding any day one motorcycles anymore, especially since we're also going to be seeing a removal of the secret stash entirely, and we're going to be seeing a further specialization of traders and what they carry. Now, you may be wondering about the better barter perk, and apparently that is going to be increasing your trading stage, and we can assume it'll work similarly to how Lucky Looter works by boosting it by a percentage. You can't mention Alpha 21 without going over the art changes. Cars, minivans, police cars, trucks, tractors, fire engines, semis, heavy machinery, forklifts, improved glass shaders, light emissive colour matching, improved reflections, many new props for indoor and outdoor, that is the end of that sentence, a large variety of posters and pictures on walls, new forge models showing upgrades as they are slotted in, new workbench model, new signs for trader compounds, lots of flavour art revealing backstories for the traders, lots of small pipe variations for decorative purposes. I just read that one straight from the dev diary because I'm lazy and I honestly haven't been paying much attention to the art because I just don't care. It doesn't really impact the game at all, it just makes it look nicer. This, however, does. Spears. Spears are being buffed. Spear damage is going to be increased and you will have a power attack instead of a throw. That'll be good for people who want to use spears on higher difficulties and found that the throw was a bit of a pain. We're also seeing perk balancing involving the removal of Sexual Tyrannosaurus. However, don't worry, the stamina effect of Sexual Tyrannosaurus will live on inside of all of the weapon perks themselves, and will be incorporated into these separate perks for each individual weapon, so you'll be much more stamina efficient with clubs if you take Pummel Pete. And each attribute in the game is now going to be getting its own version of Flurry of Blows as an additional perk for the melee weapons within that attribute. So Perception will have a perk which will allow you to increase your spear speed, Strength will have a perk that will allow you to increase your sledgehammer and club speed, and of course Fortitude, Agility and Intellect are all going to have versions of Flurry of Blows to increase their respective melee weapon speed. Master Chef is going to be speeding up cooking times, which is kind of misleading because they didn't mention in this patch note that they've also slowed down cooking times drastically, and according to Joel in my comments section of all places, the perk will increase the amount of food you find in loot. We're also seeing something called the Entity Activity Throttling System. Basically what this means is that zombie pathing is going to be less intense on your system, and it's going to update less frequently based on the distance from the player, and it will disable jiggle components, again based on the distance from the player, and each player on a server should now have some fully simulated zombies. All these changes should contribute to better frame rates on Horde Night, hopefully. We're also going to be seeing the chunk reset option. By default this will be disabled, and it will allow you to set an interval up to 70 days, upon which a chunk, which is a area in the game, I think it's 16 by 16, I might be wrong, which will be regenerated back to its original state if no player has entered the chunk in the amount of days that you chose in the previous section. However, using a land claim block or a bedroll will prevent the chunk from resetting, so you don't have to worry about your bases disappearing. We're also going to be seeing a bunch of quest changes. There is a new quest coming called Infested Clear. Basically, this is going to let you take on much harder versions of each quest. So, for example, an Infested Tier 1 quest will be much harder than a regular one with more zombies to kill, and there'll be bonus loot at the end, and the rewards will be better. Tier 5 Infested Clear quests are going to be the so-called Tier 6 quests, which is incredibly disappointing because a lot of us were led to believe that Tier 6s would be massive POIs, but it seems like they're just cramming more zombies into the ones that already exist. Speaking of quests, all quests are going to be giving you 5 reward options now, like with Daring Adventurer, but I wasn't able to verify anywhere what that actually does too daring adventurer. And another important change here is blocks. We're getting 692 more shapes in the menu, bringing the total of shapes you can make in 7 Days to Die to well over 2,000. Along with a block favoriting system to help streamline your building process, we're also getting a whole lot more windows and doors, most of which we'll be able to make ourselves, and they explained that the new windows are going to be better for performance because the windows will actually be blocks now. Previously they were apparently entities, which are apparently more intense. I'm not sure why the windows were entities. If anyone is very familiar with Unity, do let us know why you would choose to do that. Speaking of those doors, by the way, there is an absolutely insane amount of them coming, including double doors, and you can partially break doors to hit through them with melee weapons and guns. Wandering hordes will now give more loot bags, and zombie dogs and bears can now drop loot bags when they're a part of a wandering horde, and those wandering hordes will be less frequent near horde night. We also have some changes which have been delayed to Alpha 22 quite disappointingly, including bandits, the armor HD model updates, and the character model improvements. This is like the third time they've delayed them, by the way, so take the Alpha 22 projection of that with a little pinch of salt, although eventually they're bound to get it right, so this could be that time. We're also seeing changes to Navezgane. The town in Perishton in Navezgane is getting an update with new roads and POIs, and it's even getting an exclusive tunnel POI, which we're going to be able to go into and explore. Onto some miscellaneous changes now. Wires are only going to be visible when you're holding the wire cutting tool. Hazardous flaming broken gas pipe traps are now going to be in POIs, and there will be valves to turn off the gas located elsewhere. These new fire traps will slow the player down as they walk through them to prevent players just sprinting through and taking minimal damage, as little sense as that makes, because I know I would not be slowing down if I was walking through fire. Anyway, there will also be new different gore effects depending on what kind of weapon you use, either blade or blunt, with guns being considered blunt. It's a subtle difference, but it is there. We also saw an updated machete model. Zombies will now eat animal bodies, and they actually do damage to the bodies, meaning you'll have to protect your kills, or the zombies will steal some of the harvest from you, or even steal the whole thing. Finally, the world generation is going to be a bit faster. And I think that is everything. Oh, and of course, there is going to be the weird cop car thing that they refused to show us in the stream. We don't know what it is, but we can see that when they hovered over a cop car, it said E to use rather than E to search like it would with normal containers. If you're expecting that to be a drivable vehicle, I would hate to burst your bubble, but they're probably not going to be adding any more drivable vehicles to this game, aside from possibly a raft if they ever decide to expand on the water of the game, because the raft already exists in the game basically. I would imagine the cop car is going to be something along the lines of press E on it and it makes a big loud noise, and that's going to be in some way useful or detrimental to the player in some way. Basically a ripoff of the Darkness Falls car alarm system. Anyway, like the video if you learned something new, and subscribe for more Alpha 21 content. It'll be here one day, hopefully. Thank you to my channel members and patrons for making this video possible, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.